All right, so this is what I've come up for my bin storage solution. I used to have all my bins kind of just stacked up, but if I needed to get to the bottom bin, I had to take all the other bins off and get to it and put all the bins back. So I decided I'd build a set of shelves. Now, if you're a regular follower or irregular follower of my channel, you know that I'm never just building a regular set of shelves. So I can get to all my bins just as they are. The top one's a bit difficult to get to, and pulling it off the shelf and getting stuff all over you or falling on you isn't a good idea. So what I came up with was actually a really crappy set of shelves that comes off the walls. And now I can get access to all of the bins all at the same time. The top bin, easy. Middle bin, I got stuff on top of the bin. I can just leave it there, take it off. And then when I'm done, I've got everything that I need. I can just put it back up. I added some gas springs onto the shelf so it's a lot easier to put away. Some locking pins to keep it on the wall so it doesn't fall down when I don't want it to. And in this video, I'm gonna show you how to build this. As always, I made up a comprehensive, easy to follow set of plans available at my website, beddeskplans.com, and they're also linked in the description. I used some scrap plywood I had lying around from previous projects. I spent some time cutting the pieces to size before cutting out all the parts for the shelves. Here I'm cutting the bin supports on my table saw. I cut the corners off like this to avoid the frames from coming in contact with the bins as the rack is raised and lowered. Each one of these cuts is clearly outlined in the plans. I made a simple jig out of some offcuts so these repeated holes are consistently in the same location. The jig made this process go by very quickly. After all the bolt holes were drilled and I screwed the frames together, I used 1 1/4 inch screws for this, but I would recommend a minimum 2 inch screws. When drilling into plywood between the layers, the holding strength of the screws are reduced. In fact, if you've got access to a pocket hole jig, that's what I would say would be your best bet for getting a strong and lasting joint. Here I'm assembling the base of the rack. This is the bin support that will sit on the floor and remain stationary, supporting the shelves above it. This top strip is to keep the bins in the right spot when placing them in the rack. Now, originally I designed the rack to be supported using steel. I thought I was being smart by getting some old bed frames from a local scrapyard. I spent the time cutting them up into usable lengths, but when it came to drilling the steel, I discovered 2 things. 1, bed frame steel is very hard, and 2, I have no idea how to drill through steel properly. I ended up by destroying all of my drill bits and this Christmas tree bit I borrowed from my neighbor. I threw those bits into a bucket and went on to making the side supports out of plywood. I need to figure out my storage solution for my lumber stock. This is just not working. I cut the supports to the correct thickness using my circular saw and then my table saw. I don't know who I thought I was fooling with all this steel business. I'm a wood person, and if you're watching this, you probably are too. The next mistake I made was trying to drill all the supports at the same time. Sure, this saved me like 5 minutes, but because I didn't use a drill press, the holes at the bottom were not exactly in the right location because my drill wasn't perfectly vertical. Lesson learned and soon forgotten. Back at the bin supports, I inserted the bolts into the holes I drilled earlier to get everything ready to assemble. I laid everything out on the floor to make assembly easier and so everything would go more smoothly. This is where my previous mistake with the drill bit really came apparent, but most small mistakes can be fixed with a little persuasion and a good beating. I had to smash the bolts into place using my hammer, but no problem, I got them to fit. I suggest using nylock nuts, and probably some washers wouldn't be a bad idea either. The nylock nuts won't back off from the rotational friction of the rack being raised and lowered. Washers will prevent the nuts and bolt heads from digging into the plywood over time. Be sure that when you snug up the nuts, you're leaving them just loose enough so they can spin in the hole, but not so loose that they're sloppy. At this point, I thought I was mostly done, and I was feeling pretty good about myself, but that didn't last long. These front panels serve 2 purposes. They keep the bins in place, but more importantly, they act as shear supports to counter side-to-side motion. Notice that the top panel is screwed into the top bin support and the lower two are screwed into the vertical side supports. I simply face screwed these panels, but corner brackets or pocket holes would likely make for a better joint. Now, before I installed the gas springs, I tried using these bungees to help with raising and lowering the system. They did help, but not nearly enough. I would say a second set would have likely helped a lot more, but I was also mildly concerned about getting hit in the eye with a flying broken bungee every time I lowered the rack. This is where I realized my confidence in my design was a bit misguided. Okay, so I got it kind of set up, and I ran into an issue. I've run into a pretty big issue. So the big issue that I have is that when I put it down, I can't get it back up. Well, I can, but so the problem is it kind of locks itself, like it gets itself kind of all messed up. So I have to pick it up from here, give it a jiggle. Oh, there we go. And then I can put it back up. So that's a problem. I can work around that. So basically what it needs to happen is it shouldn't go all the way down. So I put it down to about here, but then I can very easily lift it back up. So that's what I've got to work on is that. And I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna extend these two legs down, or I'm gonna extend two legs down here so that when this goes down, rests on those two legs like that, and then I can still get at the tops and get them in and out and everything, and then I can easily put it back up. Okay, that's what I'm going to try. To work this idea out, I first screwed some scraps to the face and moved them around until I found the best length. Even with the legs in place, I can still access the second bin. After finding the proper length of the legs, I made up this piece and screwed it into place. You can see that this works. Sometimes some on-the-fly modifications are what's needed. I don't like the idea of the rack falling over on my kids or on me when I'm not expecting it, so I came up with a way to lock it in the upright position. I screwed this 2x4 to the wall and drilled into it so I could place locking pins through the side supports and lock it into place. I found it a bit tricky to keep the bins centered in their supports, so I simply screwed some plywood guides in place to keep them from shifting around. They basically just keep the bins centered. The next thing I did was install the gas springs. I first attached this plywood square to shim out the spring mounts so both supports are more in line with one another. These springs make raising the rack much easier. There's some links in the description for these parts. I can literally raise and lower the rack with one hand now. It's a massive improvement over those bungees. As an added bonus, the springs also keep the rack in the upright position. Alright, so that was a pretty straightforward build, and I really like the way that it turned out. I love that I can use them as shelves, and it's easier for me to get at my bins. I'm definitely using my fastener bin a lot more than I used to because I can actually get to it. I don't have as much clutter anymore because I'm able to put things back a lot more easily. But I'm kind of thinking about something that I want to know what you guys think. So when this comes down, I'm thinking, because my workstation is right here, it'd be great to have another workstation there. So maybe I could have some kind of fold down table that then maybe I could put my router table on, or I could be assembling something. I don't know. Do you think that'd be something that'd be good? If you think you'd like to see something like that, let me know in the comments and I'll come up with a way to do it. And it'll probably be in the next video. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. I just want to say thanks to everybody who supports my channel by buying plans or by sharing my videos or even by subscribing. I don't have time to mess around with the YouTube algorithm, so by you liking and subscribing, commenting, and sharing my videos, it really helps me by letting YouTube know that people are actually interested in these videos that I make. Also, when you buy those plans, it actually helps me convince my wife that what I'm doing isn't a complete waste of time. So thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.